in case you haven't been around for a while, that the theme for December is I celebrate the holy days, because there seems to be a convergence of spiritual and cultural celebrations round about this time of year, each one in their own way, reminding us not to lose our connection with our spiritual self during the darkest times of life. Now, this season, if you like, can be a symbolic time of rebirth and renewal, a kind of a time when life from the inside is prompting us to get up and to begin again and try again, just as nature seems to be doing now after the winter solstice. The whole world is turning towards the light and things are restarting, and there's the slow lengthening of days into brightness and warmth again. There's a beautiful tradition observed during this time of year. It's a Jewish holiday known as Hanukkah. Now, some people mistakenly think of it as the Jewish equivalent of Christmas. It's not. It's so very much more than that. It's a Jewish holy season that commemorates an ancient story about not giving up in the face of oppression, even when things look hopeless. Now, this year, Hanukkah began on the evening of December 22nd with the lighting of the first candle. Now, we have a menorah in the front. It's made out of plexiglass, so you may not be able to see it clearly, so feel welcome to come up afterwards and have a look, and you'll see there's one remaining candle that needs to be lit, and that will be on the end of the season, December 30th. This 8-day-long holy season is also known as the Festival of Light because it commemorates a miracle related to light that took place in the history of the Jewish nation during a time when the people of Israel were faced with a very difficult choice that went something like this. If you stand up for what you believe, you'll be killed. But if you give up your freedom and you give up your belief and you give up your identity, we'll accept you and you'll be okay. It's a tough choice in an ancient world, but actually it's happening today. I'm thinking right now about the Chinese Muslim minorities who are being sent to re-education camps in China to unlearn their culture. I'm also thinking about the forced assimilation of the Native American cultures in the United States, in Canada, where Native Americans were sent forcibly to boarding schools, where it was prohibited. They were not allowed to speak their own indigenous languages. I'm thinking about the history of the British Empire forcibly imposing its culture on new colonies, and on and on and on it goes. It's an ancient story that plays out today. Now, in the story of Hanukkah, as best as I can tell, it was, keep in mind, I'm not Jewish, about 167 years before our common era, the whole world, as it was known then, was under the rule of a king whose name was Antiochus Epiphanes, that's right. And this Antiochus had an idea for a world that works for everyone. And the way he saw that coming about was by uniting all of the world under his rule, by adopting the Greek language as the universal language and the Greek culture. In fact, he insisted upon it. He made it a law. Adopt the Greek ways or die. But you know, something always goes wrong when a government tries to marginalize or destroy a culture or a people. It didn't go very well for the people in South Africa, my land of origin, where the white rulers tried to make all of the different indigenous cultures adopt the language of the oppressors. It didn't go well. And it didn't go well for King Antiochus either. Let me explain. As it sometimes goes with a radical and unjust set of outrageous laws, they sometimes kind of slip into place. over time. They creep in. And I think it's because we, people, it becomes normal to us because we start to accept things that are repeated. There's actually a teaching in Science of Mind that says we learn through repetition, and the bright use of learning through repetition is that you and I can recondition our minds and we can recondition our beliefs by repetition. We begin to accept a new idea when we repeatedly listen to it and turn to it. We embody it. That's the bright use. Think about what we Americans are beginning to accept as normal through repetition. What values are slipping away? And what are they being replaced with? Now, for some of the Jews in our story, it wasn't an altogether bad thing, this idea of adopting the global Greek way of life. I mean, some of them saw the advantage of standardization for economic gain, and some of them even named their children with Greek names. Like many of the names we see in the Bible, Thaddeus, Bartholomew, Philip, these are not Jewish names. They're Greek. So I'm guessing some in the story were saying, look, if we all speak Greek, maybe we'd be able to talk to a wider range of people. There'll be more opportunities economically, strategically. Maybe this is not such a bad thing. However, the price is the leveling out of things into ordinariness. When diversity is no longer valued and protected and preserved, a horrible sameness creeps in, and non-compliance becomes dangerous. You see it in the United States. You see it in our airports. They're all the same booksellers. Visit any mall in America and you've visited them all. Same fast food vendors, same travel electronics vendors, same coffee shop, same. Convenience gained. Character lost. Now, in our story of Hanukkah, the standardization in economy wasn't the real problem. I mean, what tipped the balance, the problem showed up when this mad king, Antiochus, started saying crazy stuff. He said, great, now you're all speaking Greek. Now the next step is you must all adopt the Greek religion too, and you have to think and believe and behave in the same way. Now imagine for a moment today if the leader of a superpower in the world announced, you must do this or that, or we're going to nuke you. This is kind of what Antiochus was doing. Although he didn't have access to nuclear weapons, thank God, because that kind of person ought not to have access to that kind of power. So he victimized people who did not agree with him. He killed people who refused to change. And he removed people from office and replaced them with puppets when others wouldn't cooperate with him. And he outlawed the practice of Jewish spirituality. In fact, he confiscated the sacred scrolls and burned them. Now imagine if somebody marched into one of our classes and confiscated all of our textbooks and curriculum and took them out into the parking lot and burned them and said, from this moment on, you may not teach that. If you control access to information and if you control education, you can control a whole nation. And think with me just for a moment about nations that strictly control access to the internet. North Korea. So this king took over the Jewish temple. He occupied it, and he even put up a statue of Zeus. And to add insult to injury, he sacrificed pigs in the temple. Now, some people resisted, even though it meant torture and possible death. Still, many people went along with it for the sake of survival, and others because they wanted to watch and see how's this going to play out. Except one priestly family, the Maccabees, they said, no. And they led a revolt against the oppressors, and against tremendous odds, they managed to overthrow them and win back the temple. Now, I can't go into all of the details of the battle, except to say that it was considered a miracle that they could win, considering the odds. And as astonishing as their triumph was, there was something even more amazing to come. And I explain. When the Jews got their temple back, as I mentioned, it had been defiled in horrible ways with the statue of Zeus and the pig slaughtering and so on. And not only that, but King Antiochus had extinguished the temple lamp. Now, why is that important? Well, because to the Jews, the temple lamp was a symbol of the presence, the eternal presence of the divine. It was supposed to burn eternally. It was a symbol of holiness, of a divine presence, of guidance, of hope, of goodness. And it was very meaningful to people who came to the temple to visit. So it was deeply emotional and healing to have the possibility of relighting the symbolic flame. But there was one teeny tiny problem. They could find only one single container of olive oil to light the temple menorah, enough to last one day. They couldn't make more. I mean, everybody knows you don't make olive oil overnight. It takes longer than a week to make olive oil. And the city was in ruins from all of the fighting. What were they to do? This is what they did. They prayed, and then they gave thanks for what they had, and then they used it. With all the dignity they could muster, they lit the temple lamp as the symbol of the living presence. And then the miracle of Hanukkah is that this one day's supply of oil burned and burned and burned and burned and burned and burned for 8 days. There's a popular social media meme that explains Hanukkah like this. Imagine if your cell phone battery was at 10%, but it lasted 8 days. Now you understand Hanukkah. Oh, there's so much to say about this story that I'm leaving out because of time. You know, I've only got 20 minutes to comment on a huge, huge story. So I want to focus on the courageous choice of the people, the ones who stood by their spiritual conviction, who refused to crumble to oppression and bullying, who refused to go the way of the world and sacrifice their values and their identity for convenience and economic gain. And out of that courage, something totally unexpected came, something wonderful and amazing, like it always does when we stop simply going the way of the world. Stop simply business as usual and have the courage to stand still for a moment and stand up for what we believe, because out of that, unexpected good always comes. Because standing up, for example, for human rights like Dr. King did, or standing up in the presence of overwhelming odds like David did against the giant Goliath, or defying an authority that demands you do something that you cannot morally do like Rosa Parks did, will always tap into a power that is greater than oppression. Always. It may take a long time. It may take longer than one lifetime, and the costs may be high. But the cost of giving up your identity, your spiritual life, and your freedom, and your decency, and your dignity is much, 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 much higher. Not only for you, the individual, but for all of those who come after you. Let us take a moment to talk about metaphysical teachings that show up in this story. We're going to identify 3 laws you may be familiar with: the law of reciprocity, the law of correspondence, and the law of increase. The law of reciprocity, we explain these in detail in our classes, but briefly, the law of reciprocity means that for every action, there is an equal reaction. It's the balancing law of the universe. Some people call it the law of karma. And it states that what goes around comes around, eventually, sometimes immediately. We see that in the story. The second law is the law of correspondence, which is sometimes called the law of use. Let me explain it this way. In life, we are given talents and time and choice and creativity and courage and kindness and love, but we are not forced to use any of it. And when we don't use these gifts, then the way of the world takes over. So the law says we get out of life what we do with our gifts. The third law is the law of increase, which we see in this story very plainly. When we do use our gifts in the way they are intended to be used, in other words, to love instead of hate, to help rather than to harm, then the results of our efforts are increased. They are multiplied and go beyond the investment we first put into it. So when I act in harmony with divine truth, I don't have to push and pull. Things flow effortlessly. Things go beyond what I am personally capable of doing, and it seems miraculous. When I act out of line, out of harmony with divine truth, that's when all the effort and pain and pushing and manipulation comes into play. That's why it is so exhausting, lying, cheating, and stealing. Because it takes constant energy to maintain. Hanukkah is many things to many people, and for those of us who are not Jewish, it can be a reminder of the power of stopping for a moment when the whole world is going in a certain direction. All my friends, all my family, everybody's going, the whole nation's going that way, and saying, no, wait a minute, not for me. I can see for me how I need to be a little more like those in the story who said, just a minute. I won't just sit around and wait to see how it turns out. I'm not going to give oppression a chance to become normal. I'm not going to pretend there is no problem and let other people sort it out. Now, I'm guessing some people in our story may have found it easier to not think about it, about what was happening. Maybe they told their relatives who were all coming for a holiday dinner, one of those meals, said, I just don't want to talk about politics. Can't we just have a lovely Greek-style family dinner together? Yeah, and for once, can we stop talking about the oppressed people and the refugees and the separation of children from their parents and the unsheltered and health care and shootings in schools and social security and just have a little downtime? And somebody in the story must have said, no. Not when people's lives and identities and safety are at stake. No, I can't not talk about it. See, in my family of origin in South Africa, we learned to not talk about it. That was the rule. Don't talk about what the white regime is doing. Don't talk about anything of importance. We learn to avoid conflict as a way of coping. But silence rarely helps the oppressed. Silence often helps the oppressors to oppress more. Now remember the law of reciprocity that says for every action there is an equal reaction. It means that for every choice there is a consequence that is equal in stature to the choice. So choosing nothing is still a choice and has consequences. Choosing something with violence and anger is still a choice and has consequences. There's no escape. Oh, how many times I have not done what is mine to do. Pretended there was nothing wrong. Waited to see what others would do. And told myself, well, it can't be that bad. Everything is whole, perfect, and complete. I've done it with relationships. I've done it with self-sabotaging habits. I've done it when I've been bullied. I've done it too often and stayed silent and numb. And then my silence broadcasts a message of agreement. This is acceptable by me. You may defile my temple. You may wipe out my existence. Today, the first action I'm going to ask you to take is to look into your life and ask yourself, is there something going on that I'm not acknowledging as a problem? If so, and even if you can't find something right away, the second action is inwardly, symbolically, to light a fire inside of you and to let that light guide you to do something with your gifts of time, love, kindness, compassion that have already been given to you in this life. And to do what is yours to do with the purest heart and mind you can muster up, and then watch that light burn brighter than anything you can do by yourself. Now, the reason why I'm asking us to look inside first is because when we are peeling back the layers of the story of Hanukkah, if we take it literally only, then it becomes a story about one group of people and one event, vanquishing one enemy, justifiably defeating them, and it's still I win, you lose. We have to go beyond and deeper and in, where the interior battle is that of our higher mind, taming our egoic instincts, so that the urge of the divine may come shining through, so that we may stop oppressing our own light, so that we may stop oppressing the light of others, so that all sentient beings may be happy, loved, and safe, and well. Still, I can see from the story that I may need to be bold, like the revolutionaries in the story, when saying no to my own inner oppressor. And I must be equally bold in whatever it is I'm saying yes to. When I say I stand for this, let my heart cry out in allegiance to that. I stand for inclusivity. I stand for compassion. I stand for religious freedom. I stand for justice. I stand for a world that works for everyone on their terms. It takes guts to declare that and affirm that, because it doesn't always match the world. but it does match something that is already inside of you in your heart. It matches the urge of the divine mind in you. So I can see then my job is to use my gifts and take a step in the right direction and let divine mind multiply that effort and increase its reach in me. And I can then fully expect the miracle of being supported in ways that I cannot support myself. Still, it takes guts to carry on when it looks like the odds are against you. It takes guts to light a temple lamp when clearly there isn't enough fuel. In our own center's history, there have been many times when it looked like we weren't going to have enough to pay the bills of our center. Even this year, we're facing a rough year ending, due to more fires and due to the depletion of Sonoma County's population, and so it goes. You know how it goes. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough this, not enough that, not enough oil for the lamps. Likely we've all had moments when, it would have been easier just to not deal with it, turn away, walk away, give up, comply with conditions. Sometimes that is exactly how I feel about the state of the world we're in. There's not enough of me to correct all the problems that need correcting. There's not enough hours in my day to attend to all the things that need attending to. It seems like there's not enough compassion in me to be able to care for all the things that need to be cared about. There's not enough money that I have access to do all the things that need money to correct. And here is the very important lesson from the story of Hanukkah. What did they do when they didn't have enough? They prayed. They gave thanks for the little that they did have, and then they used it. And then their use was extended miraculously through the spiritual law of increase. There's a message for us today. If you have some love in you, express it. If you have some joy in you, let it out. If you have a little bit of power left in you, use it. If you have some courage in you, share it. If you have some light in you, let it shine. And watch it be extended miraculously through no effort of your own. So don't wait until you have enough love around you to be loving. That is how we light the menorah in our hearts, by using what gifts we do have, whether it seems like it's enough or not, whether we can see our way through to a brighter tomorrow or not. Because that's how we open ourselves up to the possibility of unexpected help, inexplicable goodness, powerful renewal and strength to carry on. As one Jewish scholar wrote, by lighting the menorah, we ignite the flame in our own souls, the spark that cannot be extinguished, that will burn not for 8 days, but for eternity. Now I invite you to take a deep breath in with me like this, and let your eyes close as you exhale, as we take a moment to consider what gifts have been given to us in our lives. In the infinity of life where I am, all is whole and perfect and complete. I say this in acknowledgement of the divine presence which is here in this eternal moment perfectly in its complete form, so that I may remember that there is nowhere that I may go, nothing that I can do that will remove me from this presence. It, within me and within all people, shines like a bright light. And I turn to it through this prayer so that it may purify me and redirect me to love. I turn to it so that its brightness may purify me and remove from me all judgment in my heart and release me from holding stressful thoughts about anyone or adopting any double standards or excluding anyone from the light that I know we are all part of. And so I turn to this light within so that I may be restored to the center of love that is everywhere present, so that I may consciously, along with all these people here today, remember that love is my true nature. And as I turn to this and align myself with this divinity within, every act I take, every word I speak, every thought I think that is in alignment with this life is multiplied, its effects reaching out and touching the lives of people I don't even know yet. And so I give thanks for that, and I celebrate the idea that I may return to this love at any moment in my life to be renewed from within. I celebrate this, and I give thanks that that aspect of the divine, which we call the law, is responding to me, to us, even now. And for that reason I say, and so it is. I invite you to take a deep breath in with me like this, and to sigh.